Cell phones, should they be banned in schools? Should social media be banned? Should we be really looking out for this stuff for our young people? On the other side, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Jubilee, that's Omar, that's David, and I am Charles. Very excited about today's topic. I'm glad the stuff is working for you, Omar. I don't think it's going to work for Jubilee, which is fine. David, how are you doing? We're going to go ahead and do this check-in since Jubilee is here today. So how are you doing today, David?
Back in black. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm doing well. Short check-in. Good to see you, Jubilee. And I've been wanting to come at this topic for a while, so I'm glad you landed on it, Charles.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Jubilee, Miss Ransom, how are you doing?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. A beautiful day in the neighborhood. Would you be mine? Would you be my neighbor? I'm doing great. Hi.
Oh damn! All right, man. That's some Mr. Rogers shit right there, dude.
You know,
that's like
fellas, we can't say anything, fellas, because when we do, they'll say we're bullying our one lady co-host. So, got it. She want to sing for her intro? God bless her. How you doing, Omar?
I don't know, man. I just gave some positive affirmations to have that like serenation, man. That's some good ass stuff. You ain't gonna hear that at other shows. What other show you're gonna hear that?
One that got people with ADHD.
Sure. I mean, look, Sesame Street.
You see?
You know.
I know it was coming.
Man, it's just like hey,
we'll sing the ABC song before the show's over.
Talk shit network. Look at David. David's like, what the hell is going on right now? My show's already getting derailed. I am doing really well. I am in parts unknown of the country right now. Having a very, very good time doing some work stuff, but mostly seeing all of my friends from grad school. So, and there may be a potential meetup with another member of this team, which I'm not going to specify, which could mean 3 different places in this country. You like how ambiguous that was, Doc? Doc.
I like that. I was going to say, I said somebody has understood the value of not telling exactly where he is until he leaves. That is what the secret agent spy life should be, brother. I appreciate it. I'm good, man. I'm happy to see everybody. Happy to have our full team together. Jubilee, it is very good to have you. We missed you last week. So look, there was this article flowing around about what's going on in London. And in this article, about a 10th of their schools have banned cell phones flat out. And they have some data to support it around mental health issues, things like that, it being a nuisance in schools. This has also been an ongoing and growing conversation here in the United States. While we were off camera, Omar was just telling Jubilee and I that Florida has done some banning of this. I think somebody in California may have done some banning. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, right? Like basically this conversation of cell phones, social media, and young minds is only going to grow. So what is our just general reaction to cell phones potentially being banned in schools? I've heard a lot of different arguments. So, David, since this was one that you have been thinking about, let me go to you first.
I think so. When we founded the high school, Unity High School in Oakland, California, almost more than 20 years ago now, we banned cell phones, and the school still has a cell phone ban. We were very strict with it. And we didn't have all the research that's now coming out, but I think to the average person, it's common sense that if you're going to expect young people to engage with their teachers and with one another in an education setting, the phones are simply a distraction, right? And that's pretty basic to me. I think there's a whole broader conversation around cell phones and not just for young people, but in general, everybody's dependency on them and what it's doing to our brains, right?
Right.
How it does not help or enable like real life social interactions between people, and that's an issue. But yeah, I mean, I just think they should be banned from schools. I don't think they have any place in schools. Period.
And I know a lot of parents, you know, I've seen some feel exactly the same way, especially the parents that also happen to work in education. I've seen some other parents be very gung-ho about it not happening. Let's go to Jubilee. We know you have, you know, teenage boys. They have cell phones. I think you all are out there in the DC area. How do you feel about the potential of cell phones being banned?
Yeah, it's funny. I asked my son just a little while ago. I'm like, what do you think about cell phone ban? It's like, I don't see why we would need to have a ban. He said, and I think the kids would just riot. I said, really? Do you think the kids would riot? But for me, I don't know. You know, I'm like a root cause kind of gal. And I think sometimes we look at the device, right, versus like the issues behind it that are causing the device to be, used in a way that's not necessarily helpful during instruction or during a school day. And I have a bunch of question marks because as a parent, I think about safety and security, which is usually parents' number one go-to. Like, well, what if I need to get in contact with my child? And most of the time you don't, but as a parent, sometimes you think of worst case scenario, right? For example, when I call my kids' school, sometimes don't nobody pick up the phone. Like every now and then I have to call a few times, to get somebody because they're inundated with whatever is happening in the main office that they don't have someone manning the phone. And I still need to be able to communicate with my kid. Hey, are you good? Are you, I'm picking you up early, whatever the case may be. So I think, if schools are in a position to ramp up, safety, security, and the consistency around the communication to kind of extinguish the parental argument that, look, when I want to talk to my child, I want to talk to my child. I don't want to hear that nobody was there to answer the phone, right? Then perhaps we can have a conversation. And lastly, I think it's really, I think any kind of major shift like this really does need to be done in partnership. Again, how I feel about just things being done to versus being done with. And if you want to make a shift like this, and it takes education of, students so that they can understand, hey, we're thinking about your long-term development and all of that, help them to understand, help parents to understand, and get, the school folks on board. And then we can move forward in partnership. Anything that is short of any one of those stakeholders just does create an opportunity for riots and too much pushback and distraction.
If school kids riot because they can't have their cell phones, we have failed. We have failed. I have thoughts, but Omar, what are your reactions and thoughts on potentially banning cell phones, especially as a school leader?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've got clear ideas, right? Because I'm already implementing them. Right. EPLA is a absolute cell phone free organization. Period, dude. Now, can we get away with such things? I want to be able to share those thoughts as we grow. But here's the major difference. As a 501c3, as an organization that has its own board of directors, as an organization that essentially is its own district, of course I do. Of course I do. Because this is already inside of the entirety of the student handbook policy that every parent signs into. And when they choose to come in here, it's sorry, dude, here's what's happening. Your kid is coming into advisory. They're putting their phone in a bucket. Up to God, they put their name on it, which is what we advise every single teacher to do because of cell phone stealing and right. So forth, right? And they pick it up at the end of the day because there's in my philosophical opinion, there is absolutely no place for the cell phone in school. In my educational opinion, it is a ludicrous distraction. In my psychological opinion, of which I do not have a degree in psychology, but I've read a whole lot on it. Sorry, dude, nothing points to positivity of cell phones in schools. I want to take this in a bit of a different direction to just simply say, of course I agree with these bans because I'm already implementing them. And by the way, my parents are thanking me. They are excessively thankful. Now, Jubilee brings up a good point, but I don't want no one playing on my phone. Like don't buddy new playing on my phone. Which, by the way, is a great Chappelle Show skit about what happens when people keep it
keeping it real goes wrong.
Keeping it real goes wrong. Yeah, exactly, man. Some deep cuts. And what I would tell a parent like Jubilee is like, yeah, I get you. That kid will have that cell phone after school. And if there's an emergency, there you go. And if it's happening during the school day, that's what the front office lines are for. And that is why we're like immediately communicative with our parents and our teachers. And I think we do that well. So Jubilee would be very happy, but I can understand the frustration in other schools. I'm a doc on this one. Man, kids riot if they can't have a cell phone, man. What kind of bullshit is that? Like, ooh, the kids are rioting. Oh, they don't want to go to school because they don't have their cell phone. Oh, God forbid. Like, I want you to think about that. Who reacts like that? Drug users. Drug.
You are addicted to
so it's hooked on that C, baby. They hooked on that CP, that cell phone, baby. They want to know when they're gonna get that sweet, sweet hit. And the answer is not during school hours.
I mean, listen, man.
Using that, like you want that sweet hit of CP, it's gonna have that after school, man.
Right. Go ahead, David. Before I go into my thoughts, I'll let you respond.
Yeah. So I think I see it every day when I pick up the kids getting out of school, and this is a middle school. Yeah, they get out and they're all just popping on their screens and like they lose track of everything that's happening around them as they go in for that hit, right? And then the hit goes away, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna go home now. But I do think Jubilee brings up a good point. This does not and should not the schools still have to, especially if you are going to have a no cell phone policy, the school has to pick up the phone. Right. They have to have a clear way for you to communicate into the school and for your student to be able to communicate out to home, right? Those two things, those go hand in hand for me. And I've had struggles around that as well. And then the other thing that I'm thinking about now is there is a lot of data out there. Maybe we can pull some up in a little bit. But just looking at when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. So, actually thinking definitely not elementary school, definitely not middle school, but I think high school might still be kind of an open question, looking at the research, what young people are saying. So I don't want to say if I opened a school today versus 20 years ago, we were very we had a hammer. And everything looked like a nail. So we're no phones, period. It there wasn't even any discussion. I think if we were to open a school today, we'd have deeper conversations about it. And I think it might, be something that could potentially be on the table with conditions. So, yeah.
I just read this thing. Devices are very rewarding, releasing a whole lot of dopamine in our brain circuitry. The process of getting addicted to a drug is really the same as getting addicted to a device or social media. People start out using to have fun or solve a problem, and it grows from there. Listen, man, I get where parents are coming from. This group of parents, younger parents, Jubilee is a younger parent. This group of parents have always had a connection with their child. Phones have just been kind of ubiquitous. Yep. Phones they've only been ubiquitous for sub 25 years though, right? When we were younger, I was part of that generation where pagers got around, and then towards junior, senior year, cell phones got a bit more accessible, to students. And guess what? It was the same. It got treated the same way as Walkmans got treated, the same way as hats got treated. And quiet as it's kept, the same on big campuses, the same way cigarettes got treated. You go into a big high school's bathroom, you're going to see a bunch of kids smoking cigarettes until the security guard comes. And I think that's what's going to end up happening. People be huddled up in those type of spaces using their phones. But listen, man, we're not just talking about we're not just talking about the new T19, Texas Instrument calculator. I remember certain calculators being banned from certain, from schools or whatever, right? Or if you hacked into your calculator or whatever. These are things that you have massive access to outside things. And if you're talking about safety, I don't know what's crazier than the fragility of mental health for students at this point. You feel me? And I just think that the rules have to make sense. And I think what Omar said makes a bunch of sense. Look, the same way if you want to go see a Dave Chappelle or Kevin Hart show, you got to put your damn phone. I saw Chris Rock live, and they give you a bag, and they make you put that damn phone in that bag right there. And if you want to talk on it, you can. You just got to go outside and you got to do a thing or whatever, right? But like I think that a lot of our young people, when they say touch grass, like these young people are not learning how to interact with each other, and they're not learning how to be social beings.
Yeah.
Like, and aside from all the social stuff, like you said, David, there is a ton of data that is talking about the dangers of technology and social media. And y'all know I love tech. I'm an early adopter. I got the Apple Vision Pro, all that stuff, man. But I'm telling you, in our lifetime, social media will come with a Surgeon General warning the same way cigarettes and alcohol does. I'm telling you, like people are gonna look at us 50 years from now and be like, y'all just used to let kids just be on this shit. Like, it alters your brain. Like, do you get what I'm saying? So I mean, and I know that was long-winded. I want to throw it back into discussion before I go into the next question, but I'll just leave with this. Like, schools really don't need your permission. There's so many things banned at schools. Go to school in LA. You can't wear red and you can't wear blue. Like, go to school in certain parts of Chicago. You can't have hats. The backpack has to be clear. Like, there are rules in all these type of places, and it's in school leaders, David Castillo, Omar Yanara, and Jubilee, who have all been in leadership positions. Sometimes there's like, you know what the safety issues of your locality is and what's kind of happening, and you got to make decisions to keep people safe. I don't know who's gonna win this argument about the phone thing. No, go ahead, jump in, David. I'm just running my mouth.
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned like going to a comedy show, right? Where they if you come in, you have to put your phone away. And that's hard for adults too, right?
Right.
I'm sure some people would be like, well, I'm not doing this. But
Bro,
like, okay, then you're not coming in.
Everybody.
Yeah, then you're not coming
addicted.
in. And I think the same goes for like other common shared spaces where socializing is supposed to happen. I'm talking about the cafe. I'm talking about, the restaurant environment. I'm talking about social spaces like nightclubs, right? Where people used to go and like interact with one another. And now, nightlife is kind of like people going out and, taking their little Instagram shots. And it's more about like perception than actually going and interacting with people. Right. So it's clearly not just we're talking about young people, but it's becoming a serious societal issue, and I think it's making it does make it harder for people to just connect in real life. Do that thing they call touch grass.
David, have you and I would love for Omar and Jubilee to jump in on this. Have y'all seen those studies that's talking about our boys? A lot of white boys, but not just it's kind of boys of all races that are falling more into this red pill crowd or are not knowing how to take rejection and are becoming like anti, like super misogynistic. And partially is because, like you have to go through the social mores of like liking a girl or a guy and shooting your shot and being rejected. Like it's a part of life. It's like losing. It's a part of those things. And people are like losing the ability to have those kind of conversations. To converse with each other. But Jubilee, I want to make sure that I highlight and I read this comment because somebody is on your side. And again, because I think it's a good conversation. The real Nikki J, friend of the show, you send and receive reassuring messages to your bae a few times a day, yet kids have to be institutionalized 6 to 7 hours a day with bullies waiting in the wings and Karens. For teachers, I'm going to let Julie, I would love to hear your response to that. I will say this, though. I think more marriages will last longer if husband and wife were not connected at the hip every second of the day. If it was more like the 80s and y'all go to work and David sees Mrs. Castillo when they get home and you get to miss somebody. Chris Rock has a joke that I will not butcher, but Jubilee, you gotta, your girl threw you some bait, so I will.
Thank you. I appreciate that, the real Nikki J. I mean, listen. I hear it, right? It's a distraction. When I was principal, we had a cell phone ban, but again, that was like a little while back. And I'm not big on the all for one for all, throw the baby out with the bathwater. especially when if students don't have an opportunity to grapple with and understand why this could be an issue, then I could understand why they might riot, right? Because we've been doing it like this all this time, right? And there are some schools that have cell
This
phone
riot
bans, but
thing
they
is very
don't
strong.
uphold it. What you said?
This riot talk is very strong. I've
I
never
mean,
heard this.
because I think essentially it's like we got things
If
strategic.
if your school goes into a riot because you took phones away, you have lost. We have lost.
Listen, this generation is different, and I think you'll get more from them if you actually take the time to help them understand, right, the pros and the cons versus just snatching away something that they're used to always having access to.
Ooh.
Like,
Yeah.
I just
I
right.
don't know.
I
I don't know how I feel about that.
Listen,
I don't know how I feel about that.
You-
That's like me basically being like, yo, listen, if I just sit down with these kids and tell them to lay down that crack pipe, I'm going to get good results. I'm with you on counseling kids, but like you're making an assertion and like, yo, I'm being legit about this, saying this is causing drug-like reactions
Right, in the brain.
neurologically in
right.
the
So
brain.
that's what I'm saying.
I can't
right?
treat this like bullying, which I can absolutely counsel through. I'm saying you're talking and saying, don't snatch this away. We can counsel kids out, but that's like drug counseling. So I just want to be
Right.
clear. Is
So-
that what you're recommending?
I am recommending that we stop doing things to kids and do things with them. If we're talking about making a decision that is supported by all stakeholders, and students are one of our stakeholders, but we often make decisions about them, for them, but not with them. And I am against that type of decision making because all the conversations that we have are about the children we serve. And so, right, listen, I am fine with standing 10 toes down with a ban or whatever if a student is able to understand, hey, this is why this exists in the school. At some point, you just gotta, say what it is and move forward with whatever that decision is. But I'm against it just being done in a way where it's like, well, this is what we said, right? We know best. It's like, because then how does a child, right, or a young adult internalize and start to be able to make better decisions for themselves, right? If we're saying that we're educating students, including on the social side, right, or to teach them to be digitally responsible citizens, then how can we do that without having a conversation with them? Because all we're doing is manipulating it, extracting whatever it is, right, and then expecting that they're going to go in the real world and do something different. So
But there are parts of the real world
is a microcosm of what the real world will be, where they will have to make decisions and be able to say, you know what, let me put this cell phone down. Either we're trying to help that, or we're just trying to eradicate a problem because it's annoying. We don't want to deal with this. We're just going to take it away.
But this is about safety as well.
That is not fostering responsibility.
So, okay, can I jump in? Can we jump in? Can we jump in?
I'm done.
I want you to stay there though, because I think it's a false equivalency. Like, so for instance, if I wanted to walk and bounce my basketball in the middle of class in school, there's not a conversation with me about it. If I want to have a Game Boy in the middle of class while that's happening, there's no conversation about it. There's a handbook, like there's a student handbook, and the handbook actually probably already says something about no electronics. It probably got ushered in from the 80s and 90s, right? Like, the point that I'm making is the false equivalency is like, yeah, I do think that there are certain things where it's like, yeah, we need to bring students in on this. And to be honest with you, I think that you will find a lot of students that's like, yeah, this is a distraction. But when people start saying, but there's bullies waiting and things like that, where's the majority of bullying happening nowadays for this crop of young people? Where's it happening? I have two school leaders right here, right now. And if I say, where does the majority of the bullying situations you've had to detangle, what does it start with? A phone. Social media,
online
bullying. Like, online bullying has surpassed. Kids ain't getting pushed into the locker like they used to no more. They're bullying on social media. Like, at times that's not even in during school times or whatever, right? So all I'm saying is, every argument that I think we make, whether it's about safety or agency, I think, okay, well, cool. But I can put an argument right next to it that's like, well, we wouldn't ask that. You can't just open up your lunch in the middle of class and eat it. Like, you know what I'm saying? You might have a cool teacher, but
Doc, I think you are making really cool metaphors, but I'm going to be like a bit more aggressive. And what I mean by that is like, and look, Julie, I'm with you on like working with kids because like that is our vaping
Absolutely.
policy, that is our drug policy in terms of like how are we working with you through counseling and not punitive justice, but that does not mean that I don't have a ludicrous restriction on drugs inside of my school. There is a federal ban on drugs within schools. And by the way, they're minors. So that adds that to it. And like later on in the show, if not now, I'm like, hey man, there may be an age requirement to be part of social media that I think should be considered and thought of, because ultimately, like, sorry, dude, but like suicide rates and like the ludicrous, like suicide rates in women and girls, excuse me, and the ludicrous aggressiveness found in boys has taken a radical turn away from this is sociological into psychological at the rate of which people are like looking at alcoholism and drug dependency. Meaning, I'm with you on always counseling our kids, but I don't sit down with my adults and say, adults, how do we feel about showing up to school drunk? And I certainly don't have a conversation with my teachers being like, how do we feel about showing up high? I don't have those conversations. What I do is say, okay, reactively with our kids who are smoking and having and like vaping and smoking dope. I'm so like dope. I just aged myself and smoking cannabis, marijuana, right? We work and counsel them, but it doesn't mean that I don't have it restricted. I am putting cell phones at the equivalency of alcohol and drugs. That is how I see them. That is the effects of them. And I understand that we need to make decisions with kids. But if I was to sit down with my adults and be like, let's make a decision about marijuana use in the school, like 80% of them are going to be like, bro, are you serious? Like, I would totally show up high if we were allowed to show up high. I'm like, yeah, dude, of course you
so
would. Or like, yo, how do we feel about drinking? It's like, dude,
and it's so funny, like this comment, like I'm reading the comment, I'm like, nobody said that. Nobody said boys weren't just aggressive before. When did we say that? Like here's the thing, like they're in other professions, right? Like in the NBA, you know, you used to be able to have like a cell phone, like, you know what I'm saying? Then somebody tweeted 7 years ago in the middle of a game. Guess what? It's a big ass fine if you get caught on a cell phone during during an NFL game, NBA game, whatever the case is, right? Like jobs can ban people from having phones. Like, again, I don't know if this is an infringement on the rights of young people. And I'm not talking about anything egregious. It's not like when I used to hold a Walkman at Westlake Junior High School, the security guard was taking it and listening to my damn E40 tape until my parent came to get that damn Walkman, right? Like, we're not, yeah, man. Hall of Game, when the Hall of Game came out, he took it and dubbed it. But I mean, I guess the point that I'm just making is this: listen, kids can have their cell phones on them, but it's like, yo, maybe there's a designated space in the school where you can use it during designated times, but you can't fault a teacher for being like, look, we're gonna give you you got a laptop, you got a Chromebook, and you got a calculator. I want to make sure that you're focused here and not surfing the internet. Like, I think
there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fair, right? But what I'm saying, let's think strategically and stop making decisions. This generation is different, right? My children are 13 and 14 years old. They're different than those that are 18 and 19 and 20 years old, right? There's a generation of kids that they grew up and practically had an iPad handed to them. That's who's in schools right now. They don't know another way of life. And I get the comparison to, you know, drugs, et cetera, but we even had a whole bunch of initiatives back in Just Say No. And we had conversations with kids about why you shouldn't pick up the crack pipe on the way to school.
But it was still banned.
It was, right. I'm not
Reagan
saying
was
it shouldn't be banned. I never said it shouldn't be banned. I said we shouldn't make these sorts of decisions without having conversations with students, because with understanding comes responsible decision making. That is the hope, right? It's not just that we just want to eradicate. From my perspective, right, it's not that I would just want to eradicate. When I had to build school culture, come in and make changes, kids are not wearing uniforms, kids are coming in constantly late, right? I would not just be like, let me call the parent, look, get your child here on time. I had to also have conversations with kids. Hey, listen, this is why we need you to get here at 7:45. It's sacred hour. Reading is happening at this time. And right. And so I have to have conversations so that the child can also be brought in to whatever the process is. That is what I'm saying. I'm not necessarily for or against the ban. I am against us making decisions for kids without bringing them into the conversation so that they too can have, you know, some power, some decision making, and that hopefully the behavior will be long lasting and not just something that they're doing to be compliant, because that
David,
is not, that does
David,
not
I'll hop in after you, David. I'll hop in after you.
I'm sorry?
I was telling David I'd hop in after him. He was about to say something.
Oh, okay. That's all I'm saying. I'm not against it
Yeah.
before it. Oh no. Sorry.
I think. Go ahead.
No, I forgot my train of thought.
It's gone. Okay.
Yeah.
I think so. I hear what you're saying. So, I mean, it's, I guess depending on what maybe in elementary school it doesn't really matter. You're just like, we're not doing this. You're too young. But I do think, if I hear you correctly, like there is an opportunity. Well, I don't think that's what we're suggesting here.
Right.
I think what we're suggesting here is that, like, the research is very clear around, I wouldn't say cell phone use in schools, but the impact that cell phone use has on the early kind of, adolescent brain, right? We can look at the data. The data is very clear. There's a greater impact on young girls, right? In terms of self-harm, in terms of like, all kinds of indicators. If you look at it going back for the last 10 years, the data for the girls is trending, is accelerating in the wrong direction compared to the boys. And I had an Atlantic article teed up, but I can't see it anymore. So I think the opportunity here is not just to say we're not going to allow you to do this, because then it's true. It is harder to get, people on board, right? But say, hey, here's a policy, and here's why this policy matters, right? Actually educate young people in schools, educate families around what's happening with technology in general. Absolutely. And social media. So like not doing this thing in kind of a bubble or an isolation, saying like, here's a policy and here's why we have this policy. And if you can do it well, if you can actually provide information and instruction and conversations, you might even see, like, outside of what happens in school, you might even be able to, maybe some things that would normally happen out of school will stop happening. Kids putting their phones down, not having them on all the time. Some of the data that I've been looking at is very interesting. Like when you create those tables for young people to have these conversations, most of them will tell you that they don't like their cell phones. Like they don't like they can identify that, like, I don't think this is good for me, right? And it does cause problems in school. The other thing I wanted to bring up is, and now this is not on young people, this is not on parents, but if a school is going to have a policy, having a no cell phone policy is actually quite difficult to implement well, right? Because it requires, like, you got 6 teachers, right? But when I go to Mr. Yunar's third period class, he's a little lax on the rules, right? But then when I go to 4th period and Ms. Ransom, she's, very strict, and that everybody gets it from her, and then you're the bad teacher, right? Because Mr. Yunar is a softie. So there's all kinds of, like, stuff embedded in here where, like, it's easy to write a policy and say, like, here's what we're going to do. But you actually have, if you're going to do it, you have to do it effectively. It has to be consistent, it has to be equitable, all of these things. So I didn't want to, like, just assume that, like, people can do this very easily, because it's actually quite challenging to get it right.
And what I was going to add in too, and I just wanted to address some of these comments, and Jude, like where it said, one of these said, stalking used to be considered flirting. Yeah, it was still illegal too, but I got you. It's funny how y'all think boys weren't aggressive, and then somebody saying making these decisions and not involving kids. That's conflate. We got a few fallacies happening. We never said these things. What we talked about was, like, in a ban, any whatever rule there is, of course you should be talking to students. You should listen. Guns are banned in schools, for students, but you're still going to have conversations about gun safety and gun violence and things like that. You're still going to engage these young people. We're in a moment where data is live. It is happening as we're doing it. And this thing is changing the chemistry of your brain. Like, again, 40 years from now, your kids, when they in school and they're reading history books, they be like, Granny just let y'all like just have these things that was like hurting you. Like, you know what I'm saying? I just think that I don't want these things to presuppose anything else. Nothing about, maybe ban is strong. Maybe it's regulating the use of cell phones. Maybe it's less screen time. But the point is like, none of this says that you can't have conversations with kids about, you know, how to do certain things. I hate when I do that because it freezes my stuff every time I do it. Whatever, it'll come back. But nothing says that you can't do that. Nothing says that you can't engage parents around this conversation. Nothing says that you can't talk to kids about why we made this decision and have them offer any thoughts or things of that nature. But what also can happen is and I like what Savannah said. I got Savannah's back on this. Like, some stuff, there are certain things that are up for debate and up for conversation with young people. And some stuff you got to just be the adult and be like, we're not doing that. Like, it's not some of this stuff is just, sometimes they're just rules. And like I said, the same way if you work in the NFL and they say, hey man, you used to be able to have cell phones here, you can't no more. And here's the reasons why. Like, you know, like, I mean, are you just going to sneak and do it? Well, you got to face that consequence. But I get that society wants their cell phones. I completely understand that. But the data is, people keep saying safety, and the data is clearly showing that this shit is hurting kids. Like, when have you had a spike in Black male suicide, Black girl suicide, brown male suicide? Like kids are harming and hurting themselves. And we know what the culprit is. Like, we know what's at play there. And Will's like, nah, but we didn't talk to the kids about it. Well, okay. I guess.
That, which is part of the problem.
That's what?
I said it's part of the problem.
This is my interjection about that. And this is where I have like agreeance and pushback. Of course, as an educator, I'm always going to agree in the discussion component.
Absolutely.
But everyone is I don't know if you're conflating this issue or not, which I'm going to try to delineate and say, you're making this seem as if the discussion is going to be the panacea, meaning we do need to discuss these things. We do need to have a holistic approach. I think it's incredibly important. But what I'm thinking right now is that you're saying two different, not you, but people are saying two different things, and that you're conflating an issue, and that you're saying cell phones different from drugs. And I'm trying to make the very, very clear distinction that, like, it is really hard to get a kid to stop smoking. Why? Because, dude, you're up against something that is so difficult for you to just simply talk a kid out of. They are literally hooked to nicotine. So you're trying to tell a kid, hey man, vaping's bad. Vaping causes these issues. We're doing all that. But that is a very difficult like enemy or like opponent. Let me just say opponent. That's an insanely difficult opponent because they are physically hooked to that sweet ass nicotine.
Right.
They're like getting a person to stop smoking is an inordinately difficult component because of the addiction factor. I am saying, neurologically speaking, the similarities between the addiction to smoking and some drugs are almost identical to the addiction to the cell phone, in that having a conversation about it is absolutely important, but you're underestimating the opponent and the addiction and the radically difficult brain alteration components that happen when you're addicted to this substance. And like, that is what people are up against. So to just simply say we can talk our kids out of it is a beautiful or like naive ideological perspective, underestimating the power of addiction that people have on cell phones. Much like you're saying, we're just going to talk our kids out of doing drugs and out of smoking. It takes an incredible level of counseling and an incredible level of like prescribed addiction related counseling to get out of those things. And if you do anything that is less than that, you are grossly underestimating the enemy and grossly underestimating the power of which this has on children and people, by the way.
So just to be clear, I'm not saying I'm saying both and. I'm saying to, right? Like
I think you are. I'm worried about the audience.
Yeah, I'm either for or against it. I think when we look back to the 80s when it was just say no, right? How did that work out for us? And what was the strategy that was used nationally to try to stop young people from using drugs?
Not good.
Right? So it's just like if we are likening this to drugs and that level of addiction, then what's the strategy and what is the overall outcome? Is it just to kind of calm down the complaints that, oh, this is so distracting, this is so distraction in classrooms? Or is it to have them have some kind of turnaround in the way that they think and see how they use cell phones? Like what is the overall goal that we're looking to accomplish, right? And Toya had a comment, probably 2 comments ago, about having like a social media night, right? I'm really thinking practically about how do we help students see long-term what the issues are, right? When it was just say no, or when it was about, for drugs, or they wanted to show us the negative impacts of smoking. Did anybody have to look at the ugly black lungs? I had to look at that when they were like, look, this is your lungs without cigarettes. And these are your lungs with cigarette, right? So there was always this approach to try to get the user to see what the negative impact would be long-term if you use this. I ain't saying that without this, a cell phone ban doesn't mean anything. All it does is bring peace of mind to the educators at school so that they don't have to grapple with it because it's a nuisance in a classroom, right? But long-term, I do not think it would make a difference if we're not providing conversation and education around that, along with the ban or whatever it is that would be enacted.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I don't think any of us does. I think it was like I said, like I think Omar did a good job with like trying to try not to conflate it. How you do it versus doing it is 2 different conversations. Now I don't think any of us was like trying to be the Gestapo and being like, yo, you out of here if you do this without explaining. But here's the thing. Let's go deeper into the 80s, though, right? Let's go deeper into the 80s and the 90s. All of us are old enough to know when teachers could still smoke in the teacher's lounge. You remember like how bad of an issue smoking might have been with teenagers? But guess what?
I don't know if I'm that old, but
you don't remember that? I remember. I went to school in Kentucky too, so I saw a lot of.
Yeah, I think we did that in California, man.
Oh, California. No, dude, people are smoking up in Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Like not smoking in schools is a relatively new thing, David. Like it's like in the last 35 years, maybe. But the point that I'm making that's similar with the cigarettes, forget DARE for a minute. Let's look at the thing of cigarettes again, right? So many kids used to get away with smoking in bathrooms because guess what? They teachers was already was smoking too. Like everybody was addicted. Like, and I think the cell phone thing is the same. I think teachers are addicted to cell phones too. I think I am addicted.
Hell yeah.
I closed out half of our social media because I didn't like what it was doing to me. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like that's something that I had to like kind of recognize. So again, I think similar like to those 80s, it's like, well, they letting these kids slide in the bathroom because they probably bumming the smoke off the kids. You know what I'm saying? I think we have to have real conversations about this because we know what the harms are now. Like, this is not the 60s or the 50s when doctors were giving false reports saying that cigarettes are healthy. Like, we know what phones are doing to your brain. And like, why would we want to give that to kids and not in a responsible kind of way? That's the only thing that I was saying. But Jubilee, I 1000% agree with your notion. Your notion is a whole different topic. It's a whole different how to do it. Look, we would roll out a whole agentic way. We'd roll out the South Star Classroom can help you figure out how to do those conversations. But it is that school's prerogative as to whether or not they want to not have that there. Like, and I just think that like we got to stop acting like yo, you don't. There are some things you get a choice in, and some things is just like the sister said. We're not asking you if you can text and drive. You get caught texting and driving, it's consequences. I mean,
Southside Classroom.
Yeah.
outside.
No, I
Thanks,
agree
Bill.
with 98% of what Jubilee said. And the only 2% that I want to interject is that while you are saying that this is a policy that schools should have because it's an annoyance and so forth, I am saying as an educator, I am going to ban that cell phone use, not just because I have found that it has irreparable damage to the school day. It is doing irreparable damage to children, meaning that 2% of argument against what you just said, those 6 to 7 hours that I have control, that's like saying I don't want kids smoking and I don't want kids drinking during those 6 to 7 hours, which is proven to have long-term consequential effects on children if you're smoking, drinking, especially drugs before the age of 25. I'm making that argument that cell phones are doing something similar. And if I get to sit there and say those 6 to 7 hours, kids are not basically hitting that drug, that is a good use of my time as an educator, not only because, yes, you're right, it is an annoyance. And yes, you're right, we need a holistic approach. But if I can also say you're not going to abuse this substance in our watch and we're going to counsel you through it, great. And I will say this, listen, I love when people bring anecdotal evidence into a statistical conversation because it allows me to say exactly what I'm about to say. Well, I'm with you, Real Nikki, in that you may not have been someone who decided to smoke after using candy cigarettes. The statistics would say that the overwhelming majority of kids who experimented with any type of cigarette or smoking substances, the overwhelming majority, over 87% of those people wound up getting into some level of smoking thereafter. Why? Because those candy
cigarettes is one of the most effective marketing tools to children of all time, which is why it's banned.
Correct. Yeah. Meaning it is wonderful that you had the willpower to do it yourself, but you are within that 13% of people that did not get hooked. What I'm saying is, please, let's not try to make radically statistically large inferences and generalizations on the public and the world and what's going on in the United States or in our schools based on an anecdotal piece of information that just because you had this experience doesn't necessarily mean that the world had this experience. I always want to be careful about that. So the beautiful part of getting a master's in public policy, man.
Bill,
this is a good comment here.
It's a good ass conversation.
However you get there, right? However you get to your cell phone policy, and if you're going to say we are going to, not allow this to happen, not allow young people to engage with their cell phones during the school day, your main responsibility then is to ensure that you're providing engaging curriculum and instruction, right?
Agreed.
But I wanted to look at this real quick. This is, and I put this in the chat earlier, because we're talking about cell phone usage in school, but then you have to go a deeper level to figure out, well, what are they doing on their phones, right?
6.5 hours.
This is from last year. This is a 2023 study on Common Sense Media. But just to look at this graph real quick, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, but they're tracking cell phone usage, the kind of apps that are being used during the school day. And it's mainly social media, which has nothing to do with education. It's mainly YouTube, which has probably very little to do with education, and gaming, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's what they're doing. And if you can make a connection between that and any kind of, education use, maybe. But, I think the social media piece is the most alarming. I put this link in the chat if people want to go deeper. It's from Common Sense Media. I think it's actually quite interesting for school leaders, and it's also written from a perspective that is accessible to most parents. So check it out.
Yeah, and listen, and I get it, man. And this even with this great conversation, it's not lost on me why some parents are like, nah, F that. Like, I need to have access to my kid. People getting shot, these things are happening. Like, and look, who knows? Maybe pages will come back. Maybe some type of two-way. Maybe there's a device that is directly parent to child that's almost like, a two-way radio that doesn't have all the accoutrements of a phone. And then that would kind of kill that argument, right? The point that I was making was just, listen, man, like we talk about things like Big League Chew, like Like tobacco can't have, when they have grape flavored tobacco that they sell at the bottom counter, like they know what they're doing. Like Big Tobacco was good at getting their next crop of users and addicts. And guess who else is good in that? Social media, technology, phones. Like they are good. Like kids know how to use stuff before they're 3. I was on the board at the UCSF Benioff. I sat on that board next to the guy who made the funding model for Facebook and then went to Pinterest, and then he felt guilty and he made a documentary on Netflix. None of these people let their kids look at screens. None of them. None of them let their kids go on Facebook. Yeah. They don't let them go on Twitter because they built it to be intoxicating. They built it to kind of take those things and listen.
Right. I was going to get at that. Excellent, man.
So I just would say that, man. But I think this is a great conversation. What you said is not lost on me, though, Jube. I get what you're saying. Like I said, I don't disagree with any of it, like at all. Like, you know what I'm saying? I think the how you do it is important. But this conversation for me was just more about it's probably time. Like it's probably time to like we know enough now. Like when you started learning that the faucets was lead and people was drinking lead water, it ain't like, well, they've been drinking the water. You gonna let them keep doing it? Well, no, then you're gonna have Rome. So I don't know, bro. I just will leave it there. But David, you was about to say something, man. I was droning on.
No, I just got a text. I just got a text from my son, and he's in school, but he's in the after school program. He's in the after school program, so it's a little looser. But I will tell you this: they had a lockdown a couple of weeks ago, right? Something was happening, and he was texting me, and I'm like, "Why are you texting me?" He's like, "We're in lockdown." I'm like, "And what? Why are you texting your father? If you feel unsafe, let your teacher know. They'll send you to the office. You can call, but I can't help you." So I pushed back so hard on him. I'm like, "You're in school. You're not supposed to be on your phone. Use the channels of communication that you have access to." And you know, he understood it after a while. But I'm like, that's the responsibility of the school. If you're talking about like lockdowns and safety issues, schools' number one priority has to be student safety. And I think if parents are thinking that their kids need to have a phone because their kids might feel unsafe at school, that's not a phone issue. That's a school issue.
Right.
That's a school culture issue. Right. He's going to get it when he gets home.
Damn.
I'm just kidding.
We're in our last 8 minutes, man. Omar, I don't know if you want to lead us into final thoughts, brother.
Yeah, I want to thank our audience immensely, man. Like, I love this conversation.
Here's a good one.
Buttons, and I wanted to make sure that like we got into the nitty gritty of stuff because like I love that we pushed some buttons here. Ultimately, because we got a great reaction on the show, but a great reaction from our audience. Bill's going off with some like Avragorda's number and stuff, and I'm like, Bill, man, like we got computers in the schools to do all these things, man. I'm saying like they got the Khan Academy, they got all these things, brother. Like I'm saying they don't need to be sending all these Snapchats. Here's my last take, to not repeat things that were said on the show, but to ask some interesting questions, is that like I love to think about what are the legalities of this? Like, what are the legal rights of these kids? Do they have legal rights? So one thing that I love talking about is kids are like, we've got like constitutional rights. And like, yes, you do, except for even the ACLU would say a lot of those rights are conditional. And I wouldn't say exactly suspended, but conditional, placated on the safety of the school. So if you like, and Doc brought it up earlier, like if you're wearing blue or red in certain communities and that incites both riot and violence, those things can be restricted because therefore like you are creating what is a clear and present danger, which is oftentimes a very important component of the First Amendment. So as people start thinking about the rights of students, I would say, well, is cell phone use creating not only a clear and present danger to the person, but because of the evidence of cyberbullying, because of one statistic is startling in terms of schools that have cell phone use have significantly larger levels of fighting going on, because then fighting is then incentivized because they're videotaping it. When kids no longer
Yep.
have the ability to videotape it, we're starting to see startling results. And that, well, I can't videotape it and get the glory of it. So I want us to think about the legal implications and just mention there's some states, Florida, Oklahoma, Indiana, Kansas, Vermont, that I was just doing some initial looking up on, and they're already trying to create legislation. And one thing that I would think about is, are we going to see the advent that cell phone use and perhaps even social media may have a age designation, much like alcohol use and much like drug use, where it's 21 to smoke cannabis, 21 to drink? We may see that in the future for cell phone use, and I wouldn't doubt it given the psychological reactions it's having on kids.
Yeah, David, and yeah, go ahead, David.
Here you go, Omar. This is the same study talking about social media. These are young people, right?
Yeah, man.
TikTok #1, Snapchat #2, Discord, Facebook, and then yeah. So that's definitely a real thing. And I think the age restrictions on this.
Pinterest.
Are we doing Pinterest? Yeah, yeah, man. Are we doing closing thoughts?
Yeah, closing
Yes.
thoughts. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think again, I support cell phone free schools. Students do have, I mean, they all have their own Chromebooks, so they're connected.
Right.
But I think the cell phones are just a distraction. I think if schools are going to decide to do that, they have to do it in a way that's equitable. They do have to bring parents along because, like if a child gets a cell phone confiscated and the parent's not on board with the policy, you're going to have problems. I'll tell you that. I've been on the receiving end of that and on the giving end of it. So I think my mind is still kind of open and mixed around what the possibilities are in the high school level. I agree with Omar, like that desire to, film school fights and violence in schools, is definitely real. Like a lot of schools have their own dedicated like Instagram accounts that somebody made up, and all the fights get posted to that IG, and the schools are trying to chase it down and they can't. I'm actually in videos on Instagram breaking up fights as a principal. So there's that part too, and that's not fun to know that kids are filming you as you're like trying to stop a fight. It didn't happen. It wasn't a thing in my earlier career, but in the later part of my principal career, it was a thing. But I remain concerned just about the larger issue of technology with young people and what it's doing to their brains, to their hearts, right, to their souls,
social
just
skills,
like this, social skills, all of that. I mean, this goes well beyond the cell phone policies that schools have. It's part of it, but I'm definitely more concerned, especially with having a teenager in the house and constantly having to fight. We had family movie night last night, and I'm like, it's family movie night. Put your phone down. Had to take the phone away from him. I'm like, we're turning our brains off, and we're gonna watch Little Miss Sunshine. It's probably inappropriate for you because you're so young, but it's a great movie.
No, it's a great movie, dude.
We're here to have conversations with you about the inappropriate parts. We got you.
Exactly. Yeah, you're feeling uncomfortable. Good. And so yeah, that's what I have to offer. And Omar, shout out to your shirt, man. New Order Substance was a early compilation of New Order's like early work. Came out in 1987. Epic early electronic music pioneering band, New Order, before cell phones.
Indeed, yeah. Shout out to my compadre that gave it to me, but it's one of my favorite albums.
That's awesome, man.
All time.
And Miss Ransom, because you have just did a remarkable job of just holding your own today. You get the right of refusal. Do you want to close the show or do you want to go now?
I'll go now.
Okay.
I mean, I want to go back to David's point just around the beauty of high quality instruction, right? And I know, right, if you don't have bands, you're not regulating certain things, the school will just be a really messy place. So I get it. To Nikki J's point, yes, the concerns are real, they're relevant. I am just always thinking about who these young people will be 10 years from now, and how we can support them in that process of healthy decision making. So that's really where I am about it. In terms of the parent complaint, right? I'm on both sides of it. I've experienced a school that had really great systems around communication. So when my kid goes into school, I don't have to worry about anything. I know that they're going to be able to reach out to me in a timely fashion, and I'm going to be able to know what's going on. And I've also experienced schools that their communication is not worth anything at all, right? Mm-hmm. So I get that. If you've got trust, if you've got high quality education where students are engaged and motivated and want to be there, I think it really diminishes the power of the cell phone in a school, honestly, right? So I really feel like a ban would be, it's more of a short-term solution than it is a long-term, I think. Yeah, I mean, that's that. Just like we had education around the war on drugs, fighting against AIDS, teen pregnancy back in the 90s, right? It didn't, eradicate the problem completely, but I do think just having the education and conversations around it, along with whatever the regulation or the ban is, will help our children make sound decisions for their lives, because they're not going to be this age forever. And so those are my final thoughts. Oh, and they're addicted to social media and attention, not necessarily cell phones. They are addicted to the things that cell phones can do, right? And I think the data that you just shows that is what it is, right? If we could lessen that, perhaps that would support more. But the cell phone is not really the devil. Social media is.
Well, it's a lot of devils. I would say this. I love technology. I probably love technology more than all of you. Like, I'm an early adopter. Like, I try those things out. And I think that young people are going to continue to adapt and improve. Like, listen, if you ever put that Apple Vision Pro on, you will see we have stepped in the future. That toothpaste is out the tube, right? So this generation is gonna, they're gonna carry that stuff on. And you want them to do stuff like responsibly, right? Like, you want, like, too much of anything can be harmful. And again, this is not nebulous. This is not a mystery. This is not, we don't have to guess what's happening to brains, right? Like, they're being rewired in front of us. I think having those conversations and trying to better prepare young people for what's coming does fall on us. And I think that I believe in agency, and I believe in talking to kids. And I also think we have made drastic mistakes in trying to be friends with all kids. I think that is terrible. I think we have conflated those things. I think those young people are expecting us to be adults. They need us to be adults and be responsible and bring them into this thing in the right type of way. And so again, if you're having a conversation with a 5-year-old about what's for dinner, then don't be mad when you got ice cream every night. So the point that I'm making is this: kids are going to be kids, and you let them be kids. Parents need to have a level of responsibility. I think more parents should do what David was doing. Give me that damn phone. Like, put that down. Learn how to put it down. Here's a lockbox. You're not getting back into this for a while. Like, I know Jube. I know, and everything Jube said, I know Jube will be the first one. Give me your damn phone. Let me see who you talking to. Let me see what you doing. Like, kids don't have privacy. Listen, I mean, I know it's a very liberal crowd, and you can't say certain things.
That's true.
And but again, what is the 2024 version of taking the damn door off the hinges, man? Because I had a big cousin, I had an uncle who was younger, and he was doing the most, and they took his damn door. So we need to figure out how to take the door before our kids have to deal with those consequences, man. We've never seen depression rates as high. Guess what? Not even since the fucking depression. So, like, we have more kids more depressed than during the depression, man. And I just feel like we know what the cause is. We're gonna sit on our hands and thumbs, or we're gonna actually do something about it and be okay with not being every child's favorite person for a few days. Because I promise you, they will forget it the same way everybody else in this culture forgets things after a week. That's been Jubilee. That's David. That's Omar. I am Charles. To our incredible guest today. Not a guest, but our Bill, Nikki. We had Miss Toya. We had a lot of people in here. Savannah. Want to just thank you all Centaur, my homie, that's my homie Dave. Like, want to thank y'all for all the support. Our numbers have been growing. There's 72 plus of you live with us right now. Those are just really good numbers. So share with a friend. And this is what this show is about. Like these type of debates and us being able to go and do that, and you can do it, man. Class is now dismissed. We will see you all same bad time, same bad station next.